Hi, I'm Rachel here with my cat Leia, and this is my May 2017 book haul. Technically, a few of these books I got in April, but I play it a little loose with the rules. First, I got this collection of Emily Bronte's poetry from the Everyman's Library Pocket Poets. I was supposed to get this sometime earlier in April because I was thinking of reading it as part of National Poetry Month, but I got it too late in the month and I still haven't read it yet. But I think this is a very comprehensive look at Emily's poetry, and Emily Bronte's poetry is seen as some of the most memorable poetry of the Victorian era, I believe, or maybe any era. I'm looking forward to having this as part of my Bronte collection. Next, I took part in Indie Bookstore Day at the end of April. I went to 2 bookstores in the DC area. I went to Politics and Prose and picked up My Jewish Year by Abigail Pogrebin. It's put out by a press that I'm very interested in, Fig Tree Books, which publishes books about the American Jewish experience. And this book is a memoir about Abigail Pogrebin, who is a largely unobservant Jew, but for a year she observes all of the major holidays and she writes about the experience. And this was one of my most anticipated books of 2017, and I finally have all of them on my list. I mean, there's only 4, but and I've read one of them, and now I have to get to reading the other ones, including this one. That same day, I also went to Kramer Books in DC, and I picked up The Hopefuls by Jennifer Close. This is a very DC-centric novel, actually. It's about this married couple that moves to DC because the husband gets a job in the Obama administration, and it's about the wife's experiences in our strange little capital and all of its political leanings and so forth. And she writes about experiences of the city, and then it moves on to Houston, Texas, I believe, when the husband takes a job as a campaign manager for a friend, and so it goes into campaigning politics and actually doing the office of politics and so forth. And so I thought it was a pertinent book to buy because it's about the area that I live in. And also the author was at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, which is a local book festival, and I always try to get some author signatures, and I do especially like to look for books about the local landscape. So this was 2 birds with 1 stone. I got to do Indie Bookstore Day, and I also got to get it signed at the Gaithersburg Book Festival. And I even talked with her in the line about my own writing, because a local writing organization, the Writer Center, was there, and I talked about attending some workshops in the past, and they were doing some mini workshops that day. And anyway, it was really cool, and she wrote about it in the book, and it's just, I kind of love that about getting author signatures in person like that when they're more personable. So yeah. I did buy one book at the Gaithersburg Book Festival itself to get signed, and that is Sonora by Hannah Lilith Asadi. Hannah Lilith Asadi is a writer whose parents, one of them is a Palestinian refugee and one of them is a Jewish American, and she wrote this book largely based, I think, on some of her own experiences, except that she made the mother of her protagonist Israeli instead to sort of amp up some tension, I suppose. And she grows up in Arizona and is sort of looking for a place to belong, and it's also a bit about female friendships, and I guess I'll read from the back to give a more concise summary of the book. Ahlam, the daughter of a Palestinian refugee and his Israeli wife, grows up in the arid lands of desert suburbia outside of Phoenix. In a stark landscape where coyotes prowl and mysterious lights occasionally pass through the nighttime sky, Ahlam's imagination reigns. She battles chronic fever dreams and isolation. When she meets her tempestuous counterpart, Laura, the two fall into infatuated partnership, experimenting with drugs and sex and boys, and watching helplessly as a series of mysterious deaths claim high school classmates. The girls flee their pasts for New York City, but as their emotional bond heightens, the intensity of their lives becomes unbearable. In search of love, ecstasy, oblivion, and belonging, Ahlam and Laura strives to outrun the ghosts of home, threatens to undo them altogether. And I didn't actually talk to her for very long while she was signing, but she did leave a very interesting inscription, which I think speaks about some of the things on her mind when writing and or marketing this book. So I didn't only buy the expensive new books to get signed at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, I also went to the library book sale, which I always enjoy. And one of the things I like about the library book sale is they always give us this $2 off certificate to use in one of the 2 bookstores for the county. And I guess, you know, they get a lot more traffic, I suppose, for the Gaithersburg Book Festival. But I happened to go to the nearest, well, for the past year I've been going to the nearest library book sale a few times a year, so I'm excited to have this. July is my birthday month, and so I'm thinking, you know, what better thing than to do a book spree and get $2 off. Anyway, the books that I bought at the festival are The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon. This is one of those books of alternate history that asks what if things had gone differently for the Jews around the time of the Holocaust, when a bunch of refugees basically needed safe harbor, and ultimately that turned into the founding of the State of Israel. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's a big part of why the state was founded, definitely a very big part. And alternate histories go into what if something else had happened in the 30s and the 40s, and in the Yiddish Policemen's Union, the U.S. actually allows in refugees after the first couple of years of the Holocaust, and like, okay, we'll let in refugees right now and give them Alaska. And so Chabon imagines basically an Alaskan Yiddish Jewish state. And I'm excited for this one. It's probably the most famous of these alternate histories. There's a few others that have been published in recent years, and I think I'm going to get to reading a couple of them later in the year. And the other book I got from the library book sale is this book of short stories, My First Love Affair and Other Stories by Sholem Aleichem. It's kind of funny because just recently I'd been looking into possibly reading more of his works. Ever since I was young, I've been infatuated with Fiddler on the Roof, and I named my childhood cat Chavela after my favorite character, and from there I have a lot of screen names and blog names named after Chavela. Then ultimately I read the Tevye and the Dairyman short stories, which Fiddler on the Roof is based on, but Sholem Aleichem is actually very, very prolific, probably the most famous Yiddish author, I would think, and so why not read more of his works? And I saw his short stories, and I'm like, bingo, there's a place to start. And finally, well, actually before the Gaithersburg Book Fest by a couple of weeks, I went to a very local book fest called the Literary Hill Book Fest, which takes place on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and my writing group was part of that book fest. We had a table, and I sat in for a couple of sessions for a few hours to talk to any passerbys about the group. It's kind of scary in a way, like, I'm very shy and so forth, but my leader of the group, unfortunately, is very organized and had these great talking points that helped me along and what to say to these people. But anyway, during a break from that job, I went to a local used bookstore that I had been thinking about going to for a long time, but had never actually made it down there. But the book fest was held just like a block away, so I'm like, well, why not? So it's called Capitol Hill Books, and it's one of those used bookstores where, there's books lined in every nook and cranny, and you're just wedged in there, and like I wanted desperately to look at every single shelf and so forth, but there was no possible way, even if there weren't bunches of other people in there that you had to, show some respect for and not just, shove books in their way or what have you. But I did find a couple of books within easy grabbing distance that caught my eye, and I bought them, and here they are. So this I talked about in another video, and that I'd heard about on Sharifa's, one of her Book Riot videos. This is Peony by Pearl S. Buck, and it's a story that's in large part about a family of Kaifeng Jews in China from the 18th century. Kaifeng Jews are largely assimilated and don't exist anymore. But for a while they were a significant presence, enough of a significant presence in China and in Jewish history. And this is probably now the oldest book that I have on my shelves. At least my shelves here. At my shelves in my childhood home, my mother gifted me some of her books from the 60s and 70s, and they look a lot like this, and they have that same old book smell and the yellowing pages and so forth. And yeah, this one is published in 1960. And the final book that I got at Capitol Hill Books, and also for the month, is The Bread Givers by Anzia Jezierska. I'm going to have trouble with this one, I think, even though this is a Yiddish name. And I first heard about this book and this author because this is one of the only female Yiddish authors from like the 1920s in America that I think I know about and was referenced in an article that I saw. So I put it on my Goodreads list, and then I saw it at the bookstore, and I'm like, I gotta pick this up. So here's the description of the book from the back. Sarah Smolinski, the youngest daughter of an Orthodox rabbi, watches as her father marries off her sisters to men they don't love. The sadness and injustice of their broken lives leads her to rebel against her father's rigid conception of Jewish womanhood. No girl can live without a father or a husband to look out for her, he proclaims. It says in the Torah, only through a man has a woman an existence. But Sarah replies, my will is as strong as yours. I'm going to live my own life. Nobody can stop me. I'm not from the old country, I'm American. She leaves home to take a job as an ironer and rents a room with a door. This door was life, the bottom starting point of becoming a person. Set during the 1920s on New York's Lower East Side, this is the story of Sarah's struggle toward independence and self-fulfillment through education, work, and love. It's universal and resonates with a passionate intensity that all can share. So yeah, with this time period, sort of this assimilation into American culture is sort of a big thing. Like, everybody's moving from the old country into the new country, and people are letting go of some of the rigid confines of religion, sometimes letting go of religion altogether in Judaism in America. But I think the special thing about this one is that it focuses so much on Jewish women and from a Jewish woman's perspective. That's a very unique point. Jewish women traditionally have a very defined role in Jewish life, so I'm really looking forward to finally reading this whenever I get around to it. So that's about it for me now. I've yammered on enough that my companion has left me, so I guess I'll get going. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about these books or any books that you've acquired recently. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.